Welcome, world. How you guys doing tonight? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. It's a beautiful summer night. Got a lot to talk about. A lot on my mind and a lot happening in this big, beautiful world, and we're going to cover about half and half. Going to give it about 2 minutes here while people pile in, and you can enjoy the beautiful sights and sounds of what is happening in the world today. This is Washington, for those asking in the chat. This is a scenic road in Washington State. And the music is Kavanaugh, Rain on the Beach. All right, so we are going to jump into it now. Today's white pill of the day, as many of you have already heard, is a victory for free speech on the internet. It is the semi-triumphant win of American Renaissance over Twitter Incorporated. As many of you know, Jared Taylor of American Renaissance was banned by Twitter without violating any of their explicit terms of service as part of a purge that happened last year. And as a result, he sued Twitter, and I think it's happening in California State Court. And many people dismissed the lawsuit as a Hail Mary. Maybe it's a public relations thing. It would have no chance. And here we are. The suit appears to have survived the summary judgment motion by Twitter, and I'll explain what that means. To dismiss the lawsuit as being frivolous or having no merit. And there are a number of things at issue in this case. I have a muted reaction to this. This is not my specialist area of law, so my opinion here is not specialized in that particular way. But what I would say is my understanding, without having read the complaint, is that there were several theories that were brought in the complaint as to why Twitter should be. I'm not sure what they said the damages were, or if it was injunctive relief they were seeking to reinstate the Twitter account of Jared Taylor and American Renaissance. But as I understand it, there were at least two theories of the case that were brought. One of them was a sort of false advertising claim that Twitter could not publicly state that it did not censor people while censoring or banning accounts like Jared Taylor's. And the other theory of the case was that Twitter is a public domain and is subject to First Amendment, and that people who are active on Twitter are subject to a certain amount of not really First Amendment so much, but free speech or neutral platform protections that are afforded under, I believe, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And there haven't been many details on this that I've been able to digest quite yet. But from what I understand, The theory of the case that survived was that this was false advertising on the part of Twitter. That they couldn't say that they don't censor speech while doing this. We'll need to wait for more details to emerge. I don't want to speculate on this too much, but certainly the fact that this lawsuit has survived summary judgment and will either be settled out of court, in which case it would be a win for the institution of American Renaissance, or it would be played out in the public, in which case you would have public awareness of this. Either way you slice it, this is a very good thing. So pop your champagne of the day over that. And I will say, as more details develop, I will be sure to cover this particular one, because it is so critical to anyone who believes in free speech on the internet. So now, before turning to the main content, I want to cover a new little segment I'll do on the streams that I'll just call Bravery of the Day, which is just to celebrate an act of bravery of somebody in this cause, or somebody who has suffered, and bring awareness to these particular people. And today it is Andrew Torba. Andrew Torba is the founder of Gab, Gab.ai, which is, as most of you know, is an alternative to Twitter. It was basically designed to be Twitter without the abhorrent hate speech and censorship terms of service that Twitter has. And what happened today, as many of you know, simply believing in equality of ethnic identity politics rights will often get you banned from PayPal, from Uber or Airbnb or Bumble, dating sites. You name it, you can get deplatformed for it now in the post-Trump election era. But what's amazing about this is Andrew Torba has been banned by Coinbase. Coinbase is a cryptocurrency. It is the main cryptocurrency platform. Many of you are involved with Bitcoin, or at least are familiar with what was, until December of 2017, touted to be the cryptocurrency revolution, that I myself made a video about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months ago. No, longer than that now. I think maybe 8 months ago, where I talked about the parallels between the rise of cryptocurrency and the rise of nationalist right-wing politics. And one of the things that I covered there was that they both had a very parallel track of history. And both were sort of hated or put down by mainstream media and banking establishments, financial establishments. Both were, considered to be fringe, and then achieved these momentous achievements. The nationalist right wing with the election of Donald Trump, the Bitcoin with the achievement of a $20,000 price in December 2017, which is now down to like 6,000 some. But Coinbase was the biggest player of them all in the American market. They were really, for many people, the only port of entry into buying cryptocurrencies. That was where you bought and sold Bitcoin. They were at one point the #1 most downloaded app on the Apple Store. And what was amazing about the story of cryptocurrency is that it was promoted as censorship-proof money. It was promoted as a way of being free from censorship by authoritarian governments or institutions whose control of money forbids you from actually participating in finance. And this was something that I thought was tremendously white-pilling when cryptocurrency first came around, because finally you could conduct business without being deplatformed for your beliefs. which is something that beginning in the 1960s in America was basically outlawed and was a common tactic of people dating back to the 1920s at least. So I thought, actually, I don't have this pulled up right now, but now that we're talking about it, I am going to play a clip for those of you who are involved in cryptocurrency, so that, or who want to know what I'm talking about, so that you can understand what the sales pitch of it is and how much moments like this cause you to recognize that what we're fighting for is so much bigger. Let me know in the chat if you are involved in cryptocurrency, if you've ever bought Bitcoin, or if you keep a keen eye. Press 1 in the chat if you do. Press 2 in the chat if you don't, just so I have a general sense while I pull up some relevant clips. In fact, while I'm searching for this, I'm going to put some of that beautiful, sweet, sweet music back on tap. Let me fade this out. So here you go. I want you to listen, watch this, and then let me know in the comment section how this sales pitch sounds to you. If you were to substitute nationalist right-wing politics for this particular, for what this guy is selling.
I am so excited to be here.
This is Andreas Antonopoulos, who is a very famous popularizer of Bitcoin. And I thought I pulled up the precise clip here. I definitely cut the version of it, but let me search for it. Give me a second to find it.
Retail with these systems, yes, you can do most of the things. It has to have broad adoption. It's very, very enticing to say this is about more than money.
Okay, here we go. Let me find the exact start point that I'm looking for, and then you can...
Density of adoption. And currency is the email of blockchains. Payments are the fundamental infrastructure that will enable density of adoption. It's very, very enticing to say this is about more than money. It is. Absolutely. In the long term, the vision of this technology is far beyond money. But you can't build that unless you first build the money part. That's what creates the security.
Okay. People are saying the video is echoing. Interesting. All right. Well, let me tell you, I'll post a link to this. Well, if you just type in blockchain versus bullshit, thoughts on the future of money. What he's saying here is that you have to understand that Bitcoin is about more than money. And it's because the money allows you to build the infrastructure. And if you think about the real reason that nationalist right-wing politics have not grown as we all believe that they have, as they really must, it is because they do not have money. You cannot get financing for it. And in fact, any participation or positive association with nationalist right-wing politics will prevent your ability to make money in your private life. And he sells blockchain as being censorship-proof and resistant. But the problem is, to buy cryptocurrency, you can get kicked off of their exchanges because you support nationalist right-wing politics, or if you support identity politics for people who happen to have a European ethnicity. So it's far beyond censorship. It's far beyond money. I mean, what we're talking about is the essence of your identity legal or illegal? Are you allowed to live in this society? Does your life matter if your life is one with a verboten identity? And people like Andrew Torba are on the front lines of that. So if you don't already have a Gab account, I know there's a lot of people who have frustrations with some of its functionality or the people who are there. It is my hypothesis that as hate speech regulations continue to tighten and as artificial intelligence hate speech algorithms begin to get implemented at an ever finer level, there is a very strong chance that by the infrastructure that is being set down right now at Gab could become explosive in a year or two. So that's why I'm involved with it in the short term. But now let's turn to the main topics of the day. How are you guys feeling in the chat? Are you guys feeling good? Thomas in Payne just says there are several wallets with no KYC requirements for him. Yes, I'm aware, and Coinbase is not the only. It's not the only player in the game, and it's been touted that decentralized exchanges are going to permit you to participate in the cryptocurrency economy without having to go through any exchanges at all, which would be an extremely positive development. But I'm not going to focus too much on cryptocurrency on this stream because it's its own topic. Just as a reminder before I jump into the main material here, this channel is not monetized. It likely will never be monetized. I applied for monetization about 5 months ago and have not heard anything. So if you want to make sure that I get to your comments, I will try to keep up with the chat, but I will certainly keep track of the Streamlabs and answer any questions on air. So if the link is in the description if you want to support or ask anything there. So let's move into today in the world. So I am at a bit of a crossroads right now with how I want to develop and grow the messages that I'm bringing, how to be most effective. And I had an interesting stream last night with Simon Harris that many of you were a part of, and it was a very long stream, but the real sort of fireworks to it were in the very last hour, where we had a heartfelt discussion about power, about language, about how to interact on social media platforms, and I thought it was an extraordinarily honest exchange that, given the past 2 weeks that I've had with what I've done in terms of my work for this cause, it's caused me to take this moment of reflection that I want to deal with on this stream. So most of you have noticed that I have packed, I don't do this full time, and I have, this is mornings and nights for me, and I have made the content that I've done on JF's channel substantially better than the content on my own. That for the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've done mostly live streams on this channel just to connect with you guys and sort of talk about, maybe the day in news or something. And I have done these, 3-hour, full-length, deeply organized and concise presentations on JF's channel on a variety of extremely important topics. And the reason that I've chosen to do this is severalfold. One, JF is out there with his real name, his real face, and he has a very large and growing audience where at the moment he is the bridge between nationalist right-wing politics and normies. Before that bridge was the Worski Show, and before that, I don't know, it's hard to say, right? You'd have to go back to 2016 with the alt-right. And so many of the things that I've wanted to talk about in terms of doing an archaeology of demographics, of doing a talking about the architecture as a Jewish person of Jewish identity politics, and covering various institutions there and how they're structured and organized, and their history, of mainstream media, of what happens when demographics switch. All of that I've done. I think about 5 special reports on JF's channel. Someone put together a playlist of all of them in order, which I will put the link to in the description to this video, that you can share with normies, of friends of yours. And that has been the focus of my work for the past month, with only a few sort of high production kind of videos that were mostly short, and these live streams. And I did that to get the message out. I have now spoken with many of the top sort of thought leaders in the space, in an attempt to learn and trade ideas. And now, with the benefit of that in hindsight, I'm starting to restructure my victory conditions, and how I structure what I'm trying to do over the course of the next year. And I am going to be returning to more original content. My sort of long-awaited diversity industry Starbucks edition video will be dropping before my stream with Monday on JF's show, The Public Space, on next Monday. And I'm very much looking forward to sharing that with you, because it illustrates so many of the principles that I've spoken about in the past month. So let me take a moment to connect with you guys and ask, how many of you have seen my conversations with Spencer and my presentation on JF's show about organizing and paths to power? Let me know in the chat if you've followed that. These were like 3-hour streams and things like that, so I will make them much more condensed in the future. But all right, it looks like a lot of people in the chat have. All right, great. But I think it's been important for me the past month to really kind of amplify the messages that we talk about on my channel with JF's broader audience, because the message has to get out, right? I mean, the messages relate basic things like demographics, what happens when demographics change, the structure of identity of diversity industry organizations and things like that are all they're all foundational to where we go from here. And where we go from here is, I guess, what we're going to talk about now. So I'm going to pull up an image here. This is the 5 stages of grief. And here it's in a divorce. But this is something that came up on yesterday's stream with Simon. And for those who didn't see it, let me give a quick breakdown of why I'm talking about it tonight. It is my personal philosophy that everyone has a role in the cause that people are fighting for here. And some people take big roles, some people take little roles. Some people want to be active and on the forefront. Some people just want to take a half hour a night to shitpost on a forum on the internet, in between, dinner with their wife and, I don't know, playing a game of something on Xbox or something, right? Every little thing every individual person does is productive in its own way and essential in its own way. But the roles that different people play can, there is an element of that many find offensive to principles, right? Power versus principles. sometimes the path to power means doing something or that may be contrary to your personal principles. And nowhere is that better illustrated than in the clip I played for you in a previous stream about Saul Alinsky and victimhood voltage. I played that also on the JF show on my talk about Saul Alinsky there. And I'm going to play it one more time for you, just so you have these words echoing in your head, so that before we move on with the material here, you really know where I am coming from. So I'm just trying to find the link to it on my Twitter here. And one moment. And here we go. All right. It is this one.
Because I'm willing to go. I have a hell of a lot more love than you have because I'm willing to go out and get corrupted.
So actually, let me play the whole thing in context. So I'm going to play it here, and then I'm going to do a quick discussion. Then we're going to get back to the material.
But I see the hippies are buying it, and I see a whole portion of the youth constituency that are buying it. I hear things now around that are love and
this is a very minor segment of
it's minute now, but it's a start.
By the way, is that sound clear? Or are we getting an echo again when I play clips? Let me know in the chat so that I'm not terrorizing you guys with this with this unnecessarily.
Compromise. It's the start, and from that start, maybe something can happen.
Oh, it's still echoing. All right, shit. All right, here you go. Here's a link to it. You guys can watch it on your own time. All right, I'll get that fixed before my next stream. I can hear it clearly in my own ears, but it must be something to do with the way my OBS is configured. Oh, he's saying mute my microphone. Oh, that's... Yeah, I'm not sure if that'll come through. All right, forget it. In this clip, what Alinsky tells these naive young native Canadians who are trying to win rights from the white Canadian legal system, he's telling them what they need to do to achieve power. And, by the way, it's still echoing or not? Let me know in the chat. And he's telling them what they need to do, which is to agitate, to form organizations, to frame the message in a particular way that is both slick and aggressive. So it has the aggressiveness of a passionate people, but it has the slickness of an organization backed by men in business suits. And he's telling them what works, and they say, can't we just spread our message, and people will be moved by the truth of it. They'll be moved by the love of it. And it's not in our nature to do what you are saying. We would have to, change who we are as Indians. And how can you live with yourself, Saul, by doing that? Don't you see that it's corrupting yourself? Where is your love? And Alinsky's response is, I have a hell of a lot more love than you do, because I'm willing to go out and get corrupted for it. That phrase is completely, to know and understand the depth of that phrase is, in my view, essential to, it's the starting piece from my vision of the world and what I am trying to be useful for in the next 1 to 5 years, what I'm building towards. And by the way, someone just said in the chat, World Goyim Unite said, truth always wins in the end. Let me ask you something. Do steroids always win in the end? Or I'm sorry, does the non-steroid athlete always win in the end? I'm asking this as a direct question to WGU in the chat here. There are clean and there are dirty MMA fighters, weightlifters, right? Bodybuilders. Right, there's like any weightlifting, powerlifting competition has a clean and a steroids division, if you will, right? A division where they test for steroids and a division where they don't. There's a great clip from the movie, I think it's Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. It's a documentary about bodybuilding, and a coach describes what happens when a powerlifter decides to stop taking steroids and goes clean. I think it was a powerlifter whose name was Smelly, and a journalist was asking the coach what would happen if Smelly decided to give up steroids, and the guy runs his finger across his neck in that slit throat cutting motion and says, death to Smelly, like it would be over. The ugly truth of the world, and where I differ from many people in this cause, is that I am aware of how history is written by winners, and how much of the time, if not most of the time, fighting with honor is the hallmark of somebody on their way to history's elephant graveyard. So, an essential clip from that is here in this. I won't play it because of the echo, but it's here in this clip from Game of Thrones, which is that sort of amazing moment in the series where Bronn is in a fight to his death with a highly trained knight in full armor, and Bronn basically uses very dirty tactics to defeat him, including throwing people from the crowd into him, knocking over fires in the area, and instead of having a formal sword and shield, fighting extremely dirty and ending up winning. And there's this iconic line where the queen who wants him to die says, "You don't fight with honor." And his response with a shit-eating grin is, "Yeah, well, he did," pointing to the man who, if he wins history, will be remembered as a villain, not as a hero. So it is in the spirit of that philosophy that that we're going to talk about where I am and a vision of the future and how I will be handling situations like last night, and also discussions such as the one I had with Spencer this week. I became a part of this cause because I saw something in 2015 and 16 that was different from the spirit of conservatism, of neocon conservatism, of cuck-servatism, which was the spirit of winning first, even if that meant breaking your ethical hymen, as opposed to losing with honor and dignity. That was, to me, one of the fundamental dividing lines between somebody in what was then called the alt-right, whatever you think of that phrase now, and what was then called cuck-servatism. It was plainly apparent that everyone knew that cuck-servatives would rather keep their principles intact but die. They would sooner die than break their principles. And this scrappy online internet movement, subversive, cheeky, funny, irreverent, was willing to break all of the rules that they were subject to in order to push Donald Trump through to the presidency. And then when the presidency was over, to continue the momentum to lead what was essentially a cultural revolution. Let me know in the chat if you agree that circa 2016, that is an accurate synopsis of the dividing line between conservatives and what was then the alt-right. Do you agree with what with my summary just now? And I will also check Streamlabs now. All right, one more moment here, guys. All right, it sounds like most of you agree with me, but if you don't, I want you to tell me why you don't, and I will respond to it. Because we're going to get to the theory of the world here in a second. Okay, I see we have a Streamlabs here from Graham saying, I am Canadian. The native Canadian issue is really big. I don't dislike the natives inherently or have a NY thing, but their issues and concerns have been very much co-opted by Marxists for decades. Well, Graham, that clip that I showed you and that I posted a link to in the chat it shows you the origins of those decades. This was in the 1960s that Saul Alinsky was called in, and they began to adopt the community organizing principles that I have been not just calling for, but that I have been diagramming, structuring, and trying to promote, on my mornings and nights, as somebody who is just a part-time enthusiast. But let's, the reason is it works. It wins. Even if it doesn't fight with honor, it wins. So now that takes us to why do I have this pulled up? 5 stages of grief in a divorce. The reason that this is pulled up on the screen is because what it describes is the 5 stages of grief generally, and then an application of it. The 5 stages of grief are sort of a psychoanalytical tool for describing how people deal with catastrophic loss of something and the adoption of a new paradigm. And as I've spoken with most of the top thought leaders in this space at this point, I've begun to notice a difference between me and many of them, which is that I am here. I am past. Let me talk about the 5 stages of grief, and then describe why we're talking about it. The first stage is denial. So in this example of divorce, you're getting divorced. You might think that your divorce won't happen. Like, you're aware that your wife has filed for divorce, say, and by the way, women do file 2/3 of all divorces in America. A pretty amazing statistic. You hear about men leaving their wives, but I think it's approximately 70% of all divorces are filed by women. So the first response is denial, either explicit or implicit. Either you sort of deny it out loud, or you sort of deny its implications to yourself. You may be aware that the fact of the divorce's filing has taken place, but something in your mind precludes you from actually struggling with the truth of it. Maybe you think that the divorce is going to drag out for a really long time and not really happen. Maybe you think you guys are going to come around to it and it's just going to be a separation and you'll get back together. You are not processing that the fact that the divorce happened because you are in that first stage of grief. The second stage is anger. Anger that is extraordinary and outsized. And this is an explosive kind of anger that is often irrational as a overreaction based on pent-up steam and exhaustion pent up during the denial stage. And that anger lasts until the bargaining stage. The bargaining stage is when you begin, the anger becomes, you're still somewhat angry, but you begin now to plead that it won't be quite as bad as you thought it was in the anger stage. Like, you're aware of how bad it is, but you start to try to negotiate with it. You start to say, well, maybe it's not going to be, maybe I'm not going to lose the house. Maybe I'm just going to, maybe it's just going to be a little bit, maybe we can meet halfway. Or, okay, and, then I'll do the same exercise with this with somebody dying, and then I'm going to apply it to, these sort of broad right-wing nationalist philosophies. The next stage is depression, which is what happens because you cannot bargain with the fundamental truth of the universe. The thing really is as bad as you ever thought it ever could or would be. The truth and totality of it has hit you, and it has caused the simultaneous feeling of depression and helplessness that you feel catatonically struck down. The final stage is sublimation. It is acceptance. It is when you pass beyond the depression stage and you accept the new normal. You accept the fundamental truth of the universe, that it really is as bad as you ever thought it would be. And you are starting from that to build a new paradigm. A common way this is applied is with somebody dying. At first, you think they're not really dead. They can't be dead. They're not really dead. Then you're angry. How could this happen to me? How could this person commit suicide and leave me so distraught? How could God permit this to happen? You're angry at the universe for violating basic tenets of justice. And then bargaining. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. Maybe we're going to be able to get through it. Maybe it's really not going to change my life. Depression, the realization that they really are gone. There's nothing you can do about it. You are completely helpless. You are now going to, in order to survive, you are going to have to live by, your family. You're going to have to get a new, you're going to have to work 2 jobs morning and night if you're supporting a family and it was your spouse who died or something. You're going to have to, do all of these things, all of this work. The acceptance stage is when that no longer bothers you. The acceptance stage is when you accept that as the new stock price, so to speak, where hearing about it no longer makes you feel sad. It's, yeah, so what? Our focus is on our new life. So the difference between me and so many other people who produce content or who have or so many normies that I connect with or who message me every day is that I see so many of them right here. I want to make sure that I am in the you guys can see my mouse moving. But so many of them are right here, right smack. They're somewhere between the anger, the bargaining, and the depression stages. Right? Denial is like the alt-right. The anger is like what happened with, Paul Nealon and other candidates who have absorbed certain red-pilling information and then they had these really public. They dealt with it all in public, and you saw the anger of the red-pilling process right there on display. So I would say most of the people who follow me, most of the people in this chat right now, and most of the people who talk about me to their friends or recommend my material for persuading others, they're between these two stages, bargaining and depression. And the problem is, I have a hard time connecting with people between these two stages at this moment in history, because I'm here. I do not think of us as being, in most respects, right smack dab in the middle of a culture war. I do not see us as defending turf. I see the war being over and lost before most of us were even born. And we are living in the era of revolution. We are not defending territory. We are organizing to carve out new territory. If you want, you can frame it as a kind of reconquista, territory that once was had, or as a brand new sort of governing philosophy. And I see here in the chat, I want to take a moment to connect with you guys. Nondescript says, I do not accept our current position. Let's see who else. Who else? Let me know in the chat if you agree with this, that you are. Let me know if you feel in your heart that you are somewhere between bargaining. It's not really that bad. Maybe there's a way out. And depression. There's no way out. We're all fucked. As opposed to acceptance. Yes. It really is that bad. And now we're starting from new soil, one that recognizes and is fighting for something completely new. Please let me know, because part of the purpose of this stream, yeah, go ahead, use numbers, okay? 1 to 5. 1 being, denial, 2 being anger, 3 bargaining, 4 depression, 5 acceptance. Terry Kath says yes, bargaining. Zachary Rose says 2. I see a lot of 4.5s, and that is exactly what I suspected. The things that I call for, and what has been my governing philosophy for how I've run my channel, for how I've run my Twitter account, and for the Simon Harris stream that we did last night, was that I am firmly past the point of acceptance. And the strategy going forward for somebody who is in acceptance looks very different from somebody who is in the strategy of somebody who is between bargaining and depression. The person who is bargaining says, maybe we can go back to an earlier time where she's not really dead. Maybe we can go back to an earlier time where the divorce was never filed. Maybe we can kind of meet halfway between where we are and where we were. Maybe there's something between those two things. And so your attitude is one of resistance. And one of the issues is that which you resist persists. It occupies, it lives rent-free in your head, and you are filled on a daily basis with cognitive dissonance between what you hope for and what you are struggling for. So let me introduce my struggle now, my personal struggle, and the real reason I'm doing this stream. There is a separate paradigm apart from the 5 stages of grief that is important to keep in mind, which some people call fake it till you make it, and other people call the Roadrunner effect, or the Wile E. Coyote effect. The Wile E. Coyote effect comes from the old cartoon show Roadrunner, where the Roadrunner was like this little bird who was running running on a highway, and then it would run off a cliff. And because he's a bird and he goes so fast, he would make it to the other side of the cliff, even though he traversed like 30 feet of dead air over a giant cliff that if you fall, you would die. And because of cartoon physics, the coyote would chase Roadrunner over this cliff and would be running on air, it would appear, for about 5 seconds, something that is impossible under the rules of physics. But then the camera would stop, Roadrunner would look down, and by looking down, suddenly the laws of physics would apply to Wile E. Coyote. And it was almost as if the mere fact that he noticed the truth of the universe caused the truth of the universe to kick in. And so, in a paradoxical way, the awareness that you lost is the thing that causes you to lose. So, I am torn at this moment between these two poles. One is the need to shake you guys up, to say, wake the fuck up. Channel this into something much more useful. And when I did that with my JF series, I actually thought my series with JF, which I put an incredible amount of time into, was going to be a white pilling, red pilling thing. I thought it was tremendously white pilling. It's like now this is something that is done very methodically, scientifically, articulately, something that's shareable with normies. Now everyone can see it, use it as that starting position, and recognize the need for these different paths to power, for a way to professionalize, to turn the Trump moment into a movement, a real movement, not just a cause, a movement. And what I got in response to that, the videos had an incredible number of views. I think 50,000 views for one of them alone, on demographics, which is incredible for a technical talk about demographics. But what I got as a huge response to it too was that it's too black-pilling, man. This is depressing us. I thought it was bad before, but now I know we're really fucked. I would say that's about 30% of the feedback that I got, which is incredible because I've gotten a ton of feedback on those lectures. And I couldn't believe it that was the response, because I was like, my thought process was, well, can't you see? Now you're armed with the knowledge that you can organize with. This is your moral imperative. Here is your voltage to electrify people with. These facts are they are in full. You don't need to hate anyone. You don't need to violate terms of services or whatever to articulate these. This is hope. But what I realized is there is a massive psychological gulf between me and what I would say is, at this moment in time, here in June of 2018, the majority of people who follow me, which is that I am at 6. I am at the point past acceptance, and most people who follow me are between 4.5 and 5. And my struggle is that I don't know whether or not to try to get you on the same page as me, because I don't know if the Roadrunner effect is actually going to cause whatever energy is in the people who are using my content to convince people. I don't know if it's going to cause you guys to blackpill and sink, if you were in bargaining, to sink into depression, because depression is the worst. Depression is the worst. Sadness is worse than anger, because anger is motivating. Anger gets you to take action. If you have the choice between being sad and being mad, choose mad every time. Depression is the stage before suicide. Depression is packing up your bags and going gently into that good night. At least anger has blood in its veins. Peace Lily asks, what are we grieving? And my answer to that, if I could put it succinctly, is European identity. That is, and let me, I'm going to contextualize that statement now. But I want you to know that I do not say this with the sliver of depression in my voice. I get frustration, but no depression. I am past that stage. And I call on everyone who is watching this to get past it. Go up or down the chain. You can join me in acceptance, or you can go up the chain towards denial and anger. But depression is the stage of actionlessness. And now, if ever there was a time for action. I bring this up on the subject of the Simon Harris stream I did last night, is because I took the Simon Harris stream private and am not going to be. I'm going to try to. Alchemistry says his name was Payne Gore. Yes, I hope Payne. I haven't seen Payne Gore since that stream, but I hope he comes back. And if he hasn't read a book since we asked him to, we'll give him a second chance. But I bring this up because I don't know. There were about 1,200 or so views over the course of the stream on last night's video, just during the live stream before it was, I took it private. It's because Simon has a different governing philosophy from me, and I do not want to, given the state of censorship and the moral principle about freedom of speech and freedom of association, I do not counter-signal people unless they call for violence. It is, violence is obviously a dividing line, or incitement to violence. But sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And the best response to speech is more speech, are my philosophies. And I do not play that guilt by association thing of, oh, you are enabling this or that. Simon has a very direct writing style and language style when talking in person with people, as he did on our stream, that has a place for a particular kind of audience. And I would say probably the kind of audience who goes out in the streets and is supporting Tommy Robinson, keeping Tommy Robinson alive. 20,000 people took to the streets and organized en masse to defend Tommy Robinson. And now, if so much as a hair on Tommy's head is touched in prison, the British government knows that there are 20,000 angry men in waiting who are going to take action. JNYC says protesting is a waste of time. No, it's not. Protesting is what led to the landmark civil rights legislations of 1964 and 1965. It's what led to the British getting out of India, and it's what led to the end of. It's what led, in part, to the end of apartheid in South Africa. What it is marketing. It is awareness of the institutional power you have, of your leverage to cause unrest if a miscarriage of the law is carried out. Jimmy Ross says, squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that is damn right. You can be stoic in your grave. There was a comment on my Spencer stream that I'm going to read now. I obviously don't agree with everything about how this is framed, but it expresses the crossroads moment that I feel right now in a way, it's stunning when you see someone else in a chat makes a comment in this way. And like I said, I don't agree with it 100%, but I'm going to read it here aloud so that you can sync up with me. The guy says, poor frame. Let me just make sure this is visible on. He says, poor frame. He keeps telling the alt-right, and again, I identify as heart-right, but he keeps telling the alt-right how to win. He keeps trying to give away the secrets of how Jewish people and Jewish institutions built their hegemony that could be turned back against the diversity industry. I'm saying this in my own words. But whites just can't seem to get it, even though their methods aren't that different to what white people used to do themselves prior to World War II. It seems like we really are too atomized now psychologically. The conservative cucks are too much in the thrall to white guilt, and the nationalist right wing is too much into autistic bedroom LARPing. I think I have a slightly different take on that, but he says, it's quite blackpilling, makes me think we really are fucked. I might think differently tomorrow, though. Life is an emotional roller coaster these days. When I saw this in the comments, I stopped what I was doing, and I just kind of stared at it for a couple minutes. And I had a conversation afterwards with my girl about it, and the way he says this, poor frame, this is what he's trying to do, and he's just now coming to this realization that that maybe the cause itself has not yet metastasized into a movement that is trying to win. There's a difference between trying to win and hoping to win. And the heart right, the message about positivity and about getting past the anger and the depression. That's fundamentally what it is. If you are in the anger and the depression stage, you are alt-right, I guess. And if you are past that, if you are in the acceptance stage, and now you can begin to build the foundation of positivity, a positive outlook on life with this, then you're in the heart right. And that's really one of the big dividing lines. And I'm beginning to see now, I'm trying to really, I guess the purpose of this month, in a way, is for me to really size up where people are so that I can sync with you. A fundamental tenet of persuasion and neuro-linguistic programming is pacing and leading. To pace with people before you lead. And I'm not trying to be a leader or whatever, but I am trying to persuade. So I need to be where you guys are as a starting point. And to the extent that the information I've dropped on my channel and on JF's channel is depressing or something, I hope that maybe it's so much past it that I push you through all the way to where you join me here in acceptance. But I want to hear from you guys as to whether or not you agree with me that acceptance is a good strategic goal. Because there is that roadrunner effect, that Wile E. Coyote effect that I'm afraid of with this, that that it could cause whatever mimetic zeitgeist is present in this movement online, to actually suddenly shut down completely once it accepts the true extent, accepting that we're starting from a place of having lost, a place of death, and trying to plant life on rather than trying to keep something alive. Nunya Bidnez says, not acceptance, ascendance. Ooh, I really like that as a stage 6 to this. I think that's what I'm going to call stage 6, is ascendance, which is the part of the acceptance phase beyond it where you use that information to ascend and transcend. I really like that. ascendance. That's beautiful. Thank you for that contribution there. All right. So basically, just to close out this tab of particularly, it may be the case that people who have different philosophies on whether or not they are bargaining or in acceptance may not, it may not be productive for them to appear on the same public streams because of the rules that we are living in under this cultural occupation. Simon's message articulated on my channel will cause me to lose my channel, and me losing my channel will cause me to lose my voice. Simon was, he had, I don't know, a couple thousand followers on Twitter or something maybe, and he was banned from Twitter this week because of the way that he framed a particular description of the Tommy Robinson riots. I believe it had some reference to cops as pigs and something like that, but I don't want to misquote. But Simon is okay with having been kicked off Twitter. He's okay with having lost his platform. And he has sublimated that into focusing more on writing and on his website, EuropeanFreedom.com. And and has taken this as a good thing. And if you've seen my video on JF's channel about the media strategy to destroy what was then the alt-right, which they successfully did, in my opinion, being in the acceptance stage in 2017 with the purges from social media and the new rules of social media to end free speech online. He, in the bargaining, he's okay with that because he believes the best way to preserve European identity is through his website. I have a different strategic vision for changing the world. I do not believe that it can be saved. I believe it must be born, reborn, like a phoenix, but not saved. And the idea that you can play by the rules as they were, saying the kinds of things that that Simon has every freedom to say and should say in his own medium, saying them on here, me hosting that will get me banned. And I am not in this to resist. I am not le résistance. I'm here to help plant something new. It is not an old idea in people's minds. And by the way, I've said this now a couple times, but it bears repeating. I get messages every day that I am changing minds, and not just that, in real life. I've had a significant number of in real life meetings over the past couple months. And I'm not obviously going to say anything about them, and I never would here. But I've also, at the Sargon of Akkad live Q&A, there were direct questions in the live Q&A about me, and Jewish people at the live Q&A said they followed my content and for the first time in their lives were persuaded about the positivity of white identity politics. Jewish people. This is exactly what people tell me to do all the time. Why don't you, instead of telling us, why don't you walk into a synagogue and do it? Well, guess what, guess what, guys? I am doing it. And it is making a difference, but the problem is, can I survive in a climate where the slightest infractions are considered hateful, even if you have love in your heart for everyone, including black people, Jewish people, Hispanic people, LGBT, it doesn't matter, none of that. I love everyone. I just do. I start from different positions on this. And getting past the acceptance stage of this, I think, is really helpful. But the fact is, this is doing everything everyone asked me to do in terms of changing the minds of the right people, white-collar people, people with incomes and high-status jobs, and people who are Jewish people who have places in the Jewish community, to the extent that you have an issue with Jewish identity politics as part of sort of corruption in the diversity industry. Kane says, stop being a cuck. You say you don't want that role. You've taken that role. Dude, I haven't taken that role. This started as a personal diary, for supporting Trump. And, back when the word alt-right also meant InfoWars and Breitbart. Okay? Go ahead. Tell me, Kane, if you, like every human being, don't want your messages on a bigger platform, that you don't want to change more minds. That's like a company saying it doesn't want more money, or like a newspaper saying it doesn't want more circulation. It's not about personal celebrity there. It's about how your vision of changing the world. And I actually want to do a future video about this, which is about my view on the meaning of life. But as a TLDR on that, it is the compromise between genetic goals, that is having a family, supporting people, and all of mankind, but then really all life, because all life shares genes with you to some extent, and mimetic goals, that is changing the world through ideas, which may indirectly, but in a very different way, affect your genetic dynasty. But a bigger platform is a mimetic tool for leaving your mark on the world. So anyway, I just want to communicate that. And my point about the stream with Simon is that there are certain ways to frame things that are essential for me, that I do not want to change other people's manner of framing things, but this channel has to be tight. It has to be polished. It has to be professional in that way. I am trying to create content that shows no signs of anger or depression or bargaining or denial. I'm not alt-light, so to speak. I don't deny these things. But I'm also not part of the crowd that's angry at people. I'm not angry as somebody who is positive for European positivity and pan-European positivity. I'm not angry at other groups. I'm not angry at black, brown, LGBT, Jewish, whatever, you name it. But to the extent that that's your thing or whatever, then okay, if you also support positivity, then we have a common vector. But this channel and the brand that I am really developing here, and unfortunately I do think of things like a marketing professional that way. Not that I mean this is like a business brand or whatever, but in the sense of, if you send this to one of your college friends and they say, oh, well, who made this video? InfoWars has a brand, right? Breitbart has a brand. Fox News has a brand. I do not want, personally, I want to make sure that that I have control over the message and that people know the place that I come from. Faustian Spirit asks, Frame, how can you not be angry at disturbing and violent behavior of certain groups? Do I simply accept it? I don't simply accept it. I accept it. I think I have a much more nuanced view on this. Obviously, as a Jewish people, as a Jewish person, I have a certain amount, I have an extreme amount of inborn empathy. I am proudly Jewish. I'm not There's no bone in my body that is ashamed or self-hating about it. But I am a whistleblower with respect to institutional or organized corruption. That's it. So how can I not be? Is that the answer is, like any human, like I mentioned, I've passed through those stages. But I am not content to be a shitlord posting on the internet. I want to change the world. Even if in a little way, I want to be helpful. I want to be useful. Use me. Exploit me. Let me be a pawn. Let me be a battering ram. Whatever it is, I don't co-sign on any of that hatred stuff. And I have a different vision of the future that way, as I've expressed with respect to how technology is going to likely overhaul, many things related to race and ethnicity being an immutable characteristic. I really do think that people here do not really appreciate some of that, or are not planning their future with that in mind. And I thought that came out in my stream with Richard, where Richard used the example of artificial intelligence and people overestimating it in the 1950s. And the fact is, absolutely every big business uses artificial intelligence as a total mandatory threshold entry point for doing any part of their business. You want to optimize sales, you're going to need AI algorithms that are going to need to analyze your sales funnel. You want to analyze marketing, you're going to need AI algorithms to analyze certain parts of your target, your market segmentation. You want to you want to run scripts in any programming language. I mean, it's all the way down about this. And Destian Light says the shit about AI and tech is demoralized. No, it's not, dude. There's nothing about this that is demoralizing, right? You can be positive about white identity and be optimistic about how, how people are going to be able to improve their intelligence and lifespan, and man can reach the stars and other solar systems and things like that, with the assistance of evolution. I mean, these things are, right? I mean, listen, if you don't believe in this, the sun is going to burn out eventually in a couple billion years, and then the entire globe is going to be destroyed. So, I mean, and, human beings as currently evolve, I mean, that is an extremely nihilistic, atheistic, soulless, godless form of surrender to me, to not look towards the future that way. Look, I know that, this is, I don't want to go too far down this line because it takes us away from the 6 inches in front of our face. But I'm only bringing it up because someone in the chat said I talk about that stuff to demoralize, which is totally ridiculous for the reasons that I just said. Anyway, I want to get to, since I have you guys here, I saw something in the news today that I want to cover because it is a real-life example of the power of things that I have spoken about this over the past month. Now let me pull it up here. The first thing is an interesting article here in the Federalist, and I'll post the link in the description. And from what I understand of the Federalist, they're sort of right-wing, but not affirmatively pro, or positive about white people or whiteness. But they're sort of like, they're not really neocons. They're sort of like alt-light is sort of my sense of it, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. But it's called Corey Stewart's primary win is one more sign white identity politics are here to stay. And it says, Corey Stewart's victory in the Virginia GOP Senate primary is another reminder that white identity politics are a growing force in American society. And here it talks about how he won the primary despite ties to outright racists such as Paul Nehlen and Jason Kessler, the organizer of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville last year that led to the death of Heather Heyer. So you know right away, if they bring up Heather Heyer when they're talking about Charlottesville, that they're signaling that they are, that is lamb's blood. The concept I talk about, the Passover analogy of putting lamb's blood over your door so that the angel of diversity doesn't destroy you, so to speak. You're signaling by putting it that, right? It couldn't just be the rally there. And what he's saying is what's becoming clear is that for a big swath of voters, racism, or at least ties to racist individuals and organizations, are no longer disqualifying in the way they were a few short years ago. Direct appeals to white identity, once a certain path to political oblivion, are now growing in acceptance in American politics, notching victories over moderate Republicans who will not engage them. Why and how is this happening, and how can our society address this? Really, and Nondescript says, quit ring over JF. He's taking infighting. But I'm not, dude, there's no infighting here. I am not, okay, whatever. This is outfighting. We're talking about how to, the path to power over opposition. But I want you guys to read this sentence on stream. In a way, this could be your white pill of the day 2.0. And I'm not going to read the rest of the article because this guy doesn't get it. He's not involved in this cause. And so, he doesn't understand the disease, so to speak. And so he sees the symptoms of the disease as the disease, which is, a common failing of these people who try to play doctor without having gotten their degree first, so to speak. But that is one more reason, in my view, to think about organizing in organizations. The fact that there is fertile soil for organizing now, and that if nothing else, the Trump revolution vis-a-vis identity politics has planted fertile soil for new organizations to have their shot at cultural revolution rather than trying to hold on to an old guard. Are you guys with me in the chat? Let me know if you feel me. Let me know if you agree with the messages that I've said on this stream. Give me a 1 for yes, a 2 for a no, and a 1.5 for somewhere in the middle. So, all right, 1, 1.5, 1. All right, very cool. Thank you, guys. I do appreciate hearing that, and it tells me to keep going with the direction that I'm going, because I really am sort of at the crossroads to taking a very different tack to this, and doing more things in private and less things publicly. Like I really sort of am on that crossroads between those two things, and if one of those, if I were to go more private, it would be less public facing stuff. But I'm glad that you guys are saying this. I only bring that up because I am just trying to do the thing that's most productive. So let me give you an example of the power of organization. One of the things that I covered in my streams with JF and Richard in the past 2 weeks has been the Alinskyite concept of build organizations, not movements. And the concept here, which is a funny thing to say when you're trying to build a movement or promote a movement, is that you have to do what works. And the fact is, organizations are the things responsible for movements. Movements are not responsible for organizations. Organizations are their own they're their own cell within the body of the movement, but they are the lifeblood of it. So I'm going to go through an article, and I don't want to be just another channel that just talks about the news and points and sputters at it and says, oh, isn't that shitty what the SJWs did to us? Look what they did today. Look how you guys got fucked today. Oh, wow, you guys just, like there's a way to analyze this article, which is about how this prominent hospital in the Boston area, I believe, is going to take down all of the gold frame pictures of medical system luminaries. Those, the 100-year history of great doctors who've saved countless lives, who are celebrated on this wall because the wall lacks diversity, right? There's a way for me to cover this like any other pundit and just say, oh, look what they did, isn't this terrible? Fuck that. Okay? That is depressing and non-mobilizing, and you know it. If you've come this far, you know at least enough about what you've lost. So when I cover these things, it is in the context of lessons and learning and how to turn this into something that you can use in your personal life or in your public career, or as part of a movement that may ignite over the course of the next 5 years, I want this to be part of your toolkit, a weapon. I'm here to sharpen your blade, not to tell you about the news, but we have to go over it to do that. Let me check in with the chat for a minute here first. Sweetie Squad says he's literally arguing against talking about frames. What are you talking about? You're going to have to, Sweetie Squad, if you want to develop that thread, I will read it and respond to it. But no, it's the exact opposite. Okay, people are asking for the chat, for the link in the chat, and here it is. All right. So let's go over this story, and then I'm going to talk about why we're talking about it. At the Louis Bornstein Family Amphitheater at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Brigham's Hospital, I guess Women's Hospital. I'm sorry. It starts by saying, the employees and students who regularly gather there include women, blacks, and Hispanics. The 31 gold-frame portraits of medical luminaries that cover the walls do not. The portraits are all of men. 30 are white, 1 is Chinese, right? So you're already trying to hate frame white identity as being a negative thing, right? So you already know everything you need to know about the editorial spin on this article. So I'm not going to read this article to you because it is not, you should never read these things uncritically. They should never be permitted to permeate your emotional center. You should treat it like just something in the matrix programmed to get after you. Make it impersonal if you need to get what you need out of it. So here, I'm sorry, maybe I need to click continue reading. The important thing here is the organization behind it. These things are not spontaneous. Right? Many people ask, why is this happening? Right? The first response to so many people who are in the anger stage or the depression stage of white identity, they're prone to ask themselves these bargaining questions. Why is this happening? What's behind it? It didn't used to be this way. Once you are in the acceptance stage, you can see with cold and calculating precision that there is a group behind it. There is a man behind it. There is a face behind it. They are organizing it. And what is this man, what is this group, what is this organizational institution doing? The group behind this particular diversity industry act of cultural violence against white positivity is this group, White Coats for Black Lives, a national activist group that recently published a racial justice report card that criticized top 10 medical schools, including Harvard's, for policies it says promote racial bias. Among the policies the group flagged are the dearth of plaques, statues, portraits, and building names on campuses that acknowledge contributions from physicians of color, and the presence of artwork that celebrates people with racist past. So it's a war on words and symbols, saying we need to. It's racist for hospitals and medical schools to have pictures of white people, even if they were white people who did great things, unless you have a critical threshold of non-white people, particularly privileged minority groups. And also they need to take down all their symbols celebrating people connected to racism. And they give the example of Harvard having a prominent sculpture of Oliver Wendell Holmes, a former dean who, I guess, expelled 3 black students in 1851, right? This hospital exceeded, they gave in to the demands of this group, this national activist group, White Coats for Black Lives. Let me break this down for you in layman's terms. But for White Coats for Black Lives, these symbols would still be alive today. If not for this group having organized, there would be positive white identity at this hospital. This does not happen in a vacuum. This is not just happening because of cultural gravity. It does not happen on its own. Spontaneous combustion is not a thing. There is a driving force behind it, and the driving force behind it is organizations. Top-down, centralized, hierarchical, professional organizations. So now I want you to understand how these organizations work and how it is that they can get a prominent Boston hospital to take down all of its sacred artwork, all of its celebrations of its own heritage. How did they cause this hospital to voluntarily rid itself of its heritage, to cut itself off from its roots, to destroy its own identity? The answer, and you guys can Google this if you'd like, a simple Google search reveals much of what you need to know about this organization and how it's organized. For example, here is their racial justice report card, which is something that, if you remember, I proposed as part of the organization that I described on JF Stream, and something that I proposed to Richard in our stream earlier this week. And I've actually had a number of people message me and tell me that they would like to be a part of forming and developing that. And that has been one of the highlights of my week in the work I do in this space. And there are already some groups that are laying down initial infrastructure on that. But this is their professional report card. Now, you'll recognize the concept of report cards from my talks on AIPAC's report cards, on congressmen, on each of the 535 members of Congress and Senate, and how friendly they are to Israel and the Jewish people. They receive a report card, A through F. And this is both a private institutional heat map for where to focus the organization's efforts, but it is also a public relations tool that can be circulated to the media and to key influencers so that they know what's going on. AIPAC does a lot of work educating congressmen about the state of play of the entire universe with respect to the issue of Israel. The ADL does a ton of work for the FBI. They do it for work the FBI would otherwise have to do on its own by producing these report cards. And so the information the FBI gets is filtered through the ADL lens. Where are the report cards on hate speech, on free speech, on freedom of association, on freedom of commerce, on private property rights, on gun rights or whatnot, from groups that are positive on white identity? So that when many people who aren't professionals, who don't dedicate a lot of time to this space, when they see this report card, they see the state of play. And so that other people who are there know they're being watched. Here, for example, as I did before, I showed this on a number of prior streams, but here's an example of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's hate speech report card. And I will pull this into the chat here so that you can get a clear view of it. And this is what the Simon Wiesenthal Center sends to, this is what it sends to every major, it does a big press report over it. Sorry, I'm trying to find a clear version of it, but if you can't see it on the screen, it shows that every social media company, including Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, Spotify, and of course it includes Gab, which gets an F because they don't have a terms of service forbidding hate speech, and so they're said to enable it, right? But these report cards are extremely useful PR tools. And importantly, because it has a list of demands, another concept that I talked about. I'm not talking about just like points, like the list of demands included dismantling symbology and things like that. Who is issuing these demands? If you're without an organization issuing the demand never gets issued. So let's go to the website here for WC4BL. Okay, so I'm sorry, it looks like it's cut. Okay, here you go. So here it is. It is and I'll put the link in the chat in case you want to explore this on your own. Okay, here is the structure of the organization behind it. Okay, you see they have a website, and what they are calling for is something extremely radical. You know it. I know it. Anyone with their eyes open know it. They are calling for racial discrimination. They are calling for cultural revolution. They are calling for explicitly anti certain groups. And there are certainly vectors within this organization that express hatred. Tell me if you disagree with that statement. But you know that a significant portion of this organization has people who, if you were to look at their private Twitters, are going to be engaging in things that could easily be considered hate speech. But when you go to the website, do you see any of that here? Is there the slightest smidgen of that in this professional website, which tells you what they've been up to? It describes it as our work. Has resources and publications. The first point is the report card. And look at how they frame their mission. This is a hate group. I defy you to find hatred expressed in their framing. They play the frame game. Here's their mission: eliminating racial bias in the practice of medicine and recognizing racism as a threat to the health and well-being of people of color. What do they want to do? They want to foster critical dialogue, end racial inequality, and prepare future physicians. You could make the exact same web page and substitute white for POC here, white for person of color, or white for black or whatever, and you would have an organization the likes of which I don't see anywhere on this side of the political spectrum. I sense that a big part of the reason for that is because no great leader has stepped forward to help construct these kinds of groups, but also there's nobody in the intellectual mind spring who's advocating for this sort of thing. We certainly have people who are able to make these kinds of websites at a professional level. I've spoken with a number of them. But it's because the framing is always in this kind of alt-right way rather than a heart-right way. They just can't seem to resist framing it in terms of what people are doing to us and pointing out their collective sin. Which is why on my discussion with Richard, and someone from the Streamlabs there asked, is it necessary for there to be an other, for there to be white identity? I had a radically different opinion on that than Richard's response, which is that which is to think of things in terms of systems instead of in terms of groups. Okay, Globalization in Question says, sorry, Frame, you don't get to call us us. All right, dude, I'm calling us the people in this chat. If you don't, co-sign on my message, cool. I hope you get something out of this anyway. But I'm not doing this to win a popularity contest. And to some extent, I'm not producing this content for the people in this chat. I'm producing it for the people who will see this 6 months from now, a year from now, and who will understand the driving mission behind what I'm doing. So anyway, it is very hard to do this when you are still in the anger stage or the bargaining stage or in the depression stage, because that shit leaks out. If you are motivated by anger rather than by love and by a universal message that you're driving at, it will leak out in your framing. You won't be able to make a website like this. You won't. People will suss it out right away. They'll know. But other than that, what you have to understand is that if you are in that anger stage, if you are in that depression stage, people like me producing the kinds of content that I produce cannot host you because we are not able to run successful campaigns for organizations like this. So there needs to be a layer between us. And that is one of the roles of the kind of structure that I laid out on my stream with JF about what to do next and a 5-year plan. People like for example, if I made this website and just substituted, white for people of color, and I was like the public face of it or something, just hypothetically, and I hosted Simon Harris on the stream, and Simon, made a comment that he was anti-Semitic, or that he described like the Freedom Festival as like, in the language that he did, or if someone uses the N-word or the K-word or something like that. What you are doing is you have to understand the bigger political game here is one of association, and that there has to be a layer between, because real world politics works the same way RICO investigations work. That is, They look at it system level. They don't judge you by who you are or what your beliefs are. They judge you by your by a combination of that and your ring of associations. And so people who are in the heart-right, who espouse heart-right messages, have to primarily promote, at least in their direct public messaging, other kinds of heart-right channels. That is, ones that do forsake the anger and the depression, and who frame everything publicly in terms of positivity. So anyway, now let's look at this. This is how did this one little organization you never heard of achieve this massive cultural victory of simply issuing a list of demands and gutting the roots of a prestigious medical center? Well, let's look at how it's organized. By the way, I want to make sure you can all see this on the screen. You know, you can probably guess what their About section says. They have their vision, they have their mission statement, and here is their list of demands. These lists of demands are very offensive to its political enemies. That is, people in the Breitbart crowd. I'm sure people in the, anyone in the MAGA movement, including, based black people and, based Jewish people or whatever, will disagree with this on pure equalitarian grounds, right? They are advocating for racial discrimination. It's just they want their group to get the benefits. That's it. This is just, ethnic nationalism for POC and high sparrow paths to power for their white allies. But here is the magic. The National Working Group. Just waiting for this to load here. Okay, so, and you can see that there's a certain amount of amateur hour with this. They have a medium and they have a public email, but they say that they're long overdue for an update. So it doesn't even need to be like super professional in that way. The thing that I wanted to show you actually was how the National Working Group, you can actually see it from their section on their chapters. So how did White Coats for Black Lives achieve this institutional power? And they did it the same way that I tell you about every week on my channel. They did it through big tent allies, doing favors for allies, and starting chat and doing these like chapters and affiliate groups at all these different little medical centers. And they started small with little medical centers you never heard of. But then they scaled up and they scaled up, and over the course of the past 4 years, they've been able to, they've made their way all the way up to the big names of the medical system. University of California, their UCLA Medical Center, UC San Francisco, UC Berkeley, UC Sandy Davis. I mean, these are all, every single University of California Medical Center has a chapter that promotes discrimination against people on the basis of their white race and promotes a special racial preference for people in the order of how protected they are, how privileged they are as an ethnic coalition. That is, in the order of the progressive stack. They're at Yale. They're at Harvard. They have chapters in every local institution. And they are not trying to win their culture war by having this kind of national campaign or let's get so-and-so elected. They say, let's change this one single institution in my zip code. It is a neighborhood approach. It is zip code by zip code. You guys know my work on Zip Code Please and Diversity Tourist and all these other sort of memes that I've helped kind of generate. but I want that word zip code to stick out to you. These aren't groups that are like, this is not like Hillary for America. They recognize that all politics is local, and they have people on the ground in their area. So here's an exercise I want you to, and by the way, Cody Masella has a statement saying, this happened through funding. None of them did their work voluntarily. You're right about the first part. You're wrong about the second one. Funding is necessary. But make no mistake, these people are doing what they love. Cody, let me ask you this question. If you could get paid $285,000 a year to make sure more white people get into Yale, would you take it? Would you do that voluntarily? Do not mistake money from voluntary and involuntary. It's just that money is necessary to have the professionals to do it. But there are lots of people who do not want to be shaken down by the diversity industry this way. And if you had an organization that expressly denounced anger or depression or bargaining and took a message of pure positivity and actually put layers in between those, you could set the groundwork for at least small institutions with less to lose than big multinationals from supporting institutions that could do this work. Right? Like there is money behind Breitbart. Breitbart publishes tons of stuff that calls out the diversity industry for its anti-white excesses. Right? Now you may argue they don't do it hard enough, or that they do it with a Zionist spin. But they do that. Make no mistake about it. The soil is fertile. Who will plant the seeds? And who will help it grow? So all of this stuff is, it is organized. And what I wanted to go over with this example is that a movement didn't change. Brigham hospitals didn't cut off the roots. Organizations did. And if there is not an organizational, system-wide approach, then there's going to be nothing to change here. Change won't get done. And the same direction that what was then called the alt-right in 2016 will die. And having accept that we lost in 2017 is very important for understanding how to win in 2018 and 2019. This is the way, even at an amateur level. So just so that you are on the same page with me, I want you to think of one person or group in your area that is under pressure from the diversity industry. Okay? And I'm serious. This is going to be the last segment before we end this stream. I'm sorry, there's a truck coming by my apartment here, so I'm going to wait a minute for it to pass. But we're going to do a little thought experiment, a little exercise here. Okay, great. And please, write on in the chat as you go through this thought experiment with me. Think of one organization or one person in your neighborhood who is under pressure from the diversity industry in any way. That is, maybe there is somebody who is being asked to, people on a board that is under pressure. Somebody on a school board or city council. Somebody in the local, department of, local department of sanitation, the local department of civil services, or somebody who is part of a of a company, a mom and pop shop, I don't know, some pizza parlor in the news, some franchise branch of a multinational or something. Can you guys think of somebody in your neighborhood who would benefit from an organization? Is there some favor that a group could do for somebody under pressure from diversity compliance? And a good way to think about this is think of an organization that is not cucked, but that is under sudden pressure to cuck. Now, once you have that in your mind, go ahead and post it in the chat. Nondescript says teachers, and that's right. For me, off the top of my head, I can say like the Brooklyn, Academy of Music, right? Like I know people at the Brooklyn Academy of Music who are really taken aback by the direction that it has gone in the past decade, and that there are struggles going on at the moment between how to simultaneously preserve be a cultural center that promotes music, but also is in compliance with diversity industry regulations and cultural pressure. They would benefit by having a watchdog ethics type group like this one that we have pulled up on the page, who could be founded as an organization for preservation of musical history. And that organization could be a semi-professional organization that issues report cards, that does a certain amount of it interfaces with the press so that they have their statements in there as well, even if it's with negative spin. And that they are aligned with organizations like Fox or Breitbart or something, so that while they may be one step farther, they are under mutual support. And they could fundraise, and they could get donations from people that they're directly helping, and they could revenue share with organizations like a lot of the alt media organizations that so that everyone's getting a slice of the value pie. But without an organization that is an ally, then you can't have a network. And this is part of why I keep stressing allies, 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 allies. Coalition politics is favors for favors, and it's doing favors for people who will be today that will be your allies tomorrow. So I think in an upcoming stream, I'm going to go through a bunch of zip codes in particular, and go through samples of how a makeshift organization could be set up overnight to solve someone's problem, and as a result, have an annual salary where they make their job promoting the cause of white identity. So I'll do that in a future stream, but I want you guys to think about that now. We've gone on for long enough at this point for tonight. I want to cover these topics. I want to thank everyone for your support, and I have decided to. I really, a lot of people have started supporting me on Patreon. It's up to over $500 a month now, which I really, really appreciate. Putting your money where your mouth is really essential to building an alt-right industry. I support a number of people in the movement, my own dollars, and I give 20% of my Patreon away every month to the to what has been the White Mother Fertility Fund, and what next month will be the Bravery Fund for people who've been deplatformed or demonetized or otherwise, people like Andrew Torba with Coinbase and things like that. I am going to post June's list of candidates tonight after the stream. I meant to do that earlier. I've still been collecting candidate names. Follow me on Twitter to make sure that if you have a submission for the fertility fund, that you can send it to me. But I will put up that list right after the stream. But okay, so as my final note, I want to just read aloud. Thank you, very sincerely to the patrons who support me, whose names are Let me pull up my list here. Porphyus Modest. Actually, I'm going to do this over the music. I think I would like to start creating rituals with these streams. And I want the people who support me to really kind of feel special and acknowledged in whatever little way I can right now. I'm still finding a way to structure it so that you guys get more out of it. All right, here are their names. Porphyus Modest, Goofy Grape, Halsey English, Robert Friedman, Daniel Coffey, Dave Pete, Mason Weiss, Andrew White, Rune Wig, John Krawiec, Tyler King, Clayton Welland, MK, Felix Estrada, ESS, Kim Ivokic, Leon Chrysophinios, Mr. Blue, The Rev J, Mason Weiss, Charlotte, Ed, and Season Stroud. Thank you everyone for your continued support. We are going onward and upward for this thing for as long as I have breath in my body. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, got something out of it, both at the personal level from me, at the political level for enacting change, and at the philosophical level for different ways to see the world. So I'm going to let this play us out. Thank you again for joining me on another Love Stream.